Talofa lava, malua lelei, whakalofa lahi atu, kia rana, bulavanaka, namaste, assalam alaikum, and it's Tuvaluan Language Week. It started yesterday, Tuvaluan, and so it's Ulafale Mai in goodness me. Say it all the time. It's great to be here with you this morning for our annual hui. I'd like to acknowledge our guests who are with us here today and who you'll be hearing from shortly. We've got Jack Boyle, the President of PPTA Te Riu Roa, Maury Mulheron, President. I didn't drink that much last night, honestly. President of the New South Wales Teachers Federation and the Deputy President of the Australian Education Union. Angelo Gavrielatos, the Project Director for the Global Response of Education International. Nahiwi Tumuana, the Chairperson of Ngāti Kahungunu Iwi Incorporated. Dr. Kerry Milne, Ihimaira, couldn't make it for dinner last night, but hopefully she is here somewhere. She's going to be talking to us tomorrow morning. And Felicia Brown-Acton, Founder and Director of FINE. And we have other guests with us this morning as well, and you are very, very welcome. It's lovely to have you here. And our Education Minister, Chris Hipkins, I'm really pleased that you are here with us. I think we would both agree. I think we would both agree that it has been a really challenging year as we've worked to find a settlement to the Kua Taitiwā campaign. But ultimately, what comes through really, really clearly is we share the same goals for Aotearoa. We share the same values, and we all have tamariki at the heart of what we do. In the end, I think it's those shared goals and values that mean that the relationship between NZEI Te Riu Roa and this government can stay strong in spite of robust debate about how we get there. I look forward to hearing from you really shortly about looking ahead. I hope that you all enjoyed last night and the celebration of the awards that were received by some of our wonderful members. Members who've been so active in advocating for our tamariki and those who work closest to them, and an education system that meets the needs of all of our tamariki. Nau mai, haere mai. It's really exciting to see so many of you here to contribute to our conference over the next few days, and I'm looking forward to every single moment. I have to say, one of our biggest achievements as NZEI Te Riu Roa whānau over the last year has been the huge growth, not only in the number of members, but in those who take active leadership roles in our union, and you are all among them. I hope you get a lot over the next couple of days, and you bring that inspiration back into your local areas. The theme of this year's conference, as I've said already, is whakamana tangata. It's about acknowledging that every single person in our union has a role to play, and it's about empowering every person to play their part. That's the power of collectivism. That's the power of unionism. And that's why, as part of this conference, we're celebrating so many achievements from the past year. I want you to keep this theme at the top of your mind as you listen to our speakers and engage in our workshops over the next couple of days. We in this room are but a small handful of the close to 50,000 strong union. So if we are to truly live up to the theme of whakamana tangata, we all need to ask ourselves, How will we all take what we learn and discuss at conference and use it to empower the rest of our membership? Nā tō roro, nā taku roro, ka ora ai te iwi. With your food basket and my food basket, the people will thrive. To me, whakamana tangata is also about us empowering all the different parts of the education sector that make up NZEI Te Riu Roa and working together as a union to increase our power. So while some of our conference will be about reflecting on the truly historic year that it's been, it's really important for us to be looking forward to the next big issues. A fully funded pay equity settlement for teacher aides by the end of the year. Which will pave the way for quickly progressing pay equity for other support staff workers. Fair pay and fair work for early childhood teachers whose work is critical to our children's first 1,000 days. They have been left behind by a lack of funding for far too long, and we've seen the gap open up even more recently. Tangible progress on the issues in our accord with the government, particularly around workload and wellbeing. I'll talk about these issues a little more later, but for now I'd really like to introduce the Minister of Education. He's got to catch a flight, so I know we're on a time frame here. Ngā mihi nui, Minister. Please welcome our Minister of Education, Chris Hipkins.
Ena mana, ena reo, ena rauranga tirama, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Good morning. 8:30 on a Monday morning, not bad, well done. It's good to see you all, and it is fantastic to be here at the NZEI conference. This is the first opportunity that I've had in the nearly 2 years that I have been the Minister of Education to address an NZEI annual conference. As Lynda mentioned last night, this time last year I was stuck in Wellington. I was at home in Wellington following the slightly early arrival of our second child, Isabel, and I was unable to come up here to Rotorua to be with you. But the year prior to that, I did manage to make it to the NZEI annual conference, and I brought along with me my then almost 1-year-old son, Charlie. I have to confess I was a little worried that Charlie would be a bit of a distraction at the conference dinner on the Sunday night. It turned out that the biggest challenge was getting him back at the end of the evening when it came time to go home. As we gathered here 2 years ago, we were all waiting. The 2017 general election had not delivered a clear verdict, and the formation of the next government was going to be down to negotiation between the parties. Those negotiations didn't get underway until all of the votes had been counted and all of the special votes were in. So while the nature and makeup of our next government at that point wasn't clear, the challenges that the new government was going to face, whomever the new government was, in the education area were clear. A decade of underfunding and neglect had taken their toll on our education system. Workforce morale was at an all-time low after 9 years of being spoken down to, or worse, completely ignored. Too much emphasis on compliance and accountability, and not enough emphasis on teaching and learning, had eroded trust. Implementation of the curriculum had been narrowed in too many places to focus only on what was easy to measure and record against simplistic targets. Workloads had grown exponentially, but not enough of that extra energy was flowing through into the places where it could actually make a difference to learning, progress and achievement. Far too much of it was being devoted to bureaucratic, compliance-focused activity and not enough to teaching and learning. Trust between government and the teaching profession was at rock bottom. The announcement of a new Labour New Zealand First coalition government, supported by the Green Party, opened the door to a new way of doing things. It provided an opportunity to hit the reset button and to look at the old challenges with fresh eyes. When I became the Minister of Education, I knew that we needed to move from a command and control model of decision making to one that was based on true collaboration. But I also knew that we were faced with a number of pressing issues that needed urgent attention and action. We moved quickly to address those issues that you told us were the most important ones for you as experts working in the sector. We abolished national standards. We agreed with you that they weren't helpful. They were neither national nor standard. They were time-consuming to administer, and they didn't actually help what really mattered, which was kids learning and teachers teaching. We abolished the charter school model. We wanted to make sure that every student could access our national curriculum through a strong public education system, and because we put a premium on professional qualifications and experienced registered teachers. We reinstated the role of teachers to your own professional body and renamed it as the Teaching Council to reflect its true role. We took swift action to start addressing the teacher shortage, which was already at crisis levels. We funded free refresher training, introduced more support for beginning teachers, increased financial incentives for those entering teacher training, started a major recruitment drive, and provided recruitment and relocation support to the schools seeking to attract teachers. The changes that we made up front and the swiftness with which we made them were a clear demonstration of our commitment as a government to a quality public education system where teaching and learning are at the heart of decision making. As Minister of Education, I've attempted to change the way that we engage with the sector and with all of the stakeholders that are in it. We've tried to take a collaborative approach to all that we do. Just over a year ago at our education summits in Christchurch and in Auckland, we made a commitment to build the world's best education system for all New Zealanders. Over 48,000 New Zealanders, including many of you, responded with enthusiasm to the call for change. You've taken part in so many conversations about change in education, and you've given us your ideas. And now, as we're in the second half of 2019, while there are still conversations that we need to have, the shape of our future education system is starting to become clearer. We're starting to see the results of our collective efforts at transformation. The draft statement of national education and learning priorities that I released recently captures the vision and the values that came out of that very broad consultation process. The National Education Growth Plan that I've released over the last few months responds to your feedback that the government has been just too slow to respond to the pressures caused by role growth. We've already brought forward over $1 billion in capital spending so that we can get new classrooms where they're needed a lot faster, so that you don't end up teaching in libraries, staff rooms, hallways, and drafty school halls because your school is overcrowded. A new strategic plan for early childhood education, He Taonga Te Tamati, has been out for consultation, and we're in the final stages of digesting that feedback and finalising the plan. The Tomorrow Schools Task Force produced some bold recommendations for change, and we asked them to take those recommendations on the road around the country so that everybody with an interest could have their say and help to shape their final recommendations. That final task force report has now been received, and in the next month or so we'll be releasing that along with the government's response to it. Through our conversations, you've told us resoundingly of your concern that some of our most vulnerable young people aren't getting the support that they need to thrive in education. That's why over the last two budgets, we've put over $600 million more funding into learning support. That's more OARS places, more early intervention, more speech and language therapy, more ESOL tuition, and more support for hearing and visually impaired students, among other things. New Zealanders told us that they wanted more of their own stories told within our curriculum. So that's why we're working with you to make a commitment to make New Zealand history content an integral part of our curriculum at all levels by 2022. Young people and teachers alike, parents as well, have also stressed the importance of cultural competence in the classroom. And that's why we're putting more funding into programs like Te Hurihanga Nui and others, so that every teacher has the access to the professional development that they need to respond to the needs of all of their students. At the Education Summits, I said that change in education had too often failed in the past because it had been imposed from the top rather than worked through in collaboration with others. I said that we wanted to change that we wanted to work together with principals and teachers, with parents, with children, with young people, those with disabilities or in need of learning support, our Māori and Pacific communities, to build a more inclusive, responsive and equitable system for all of our learners. I meant what I said then, and I still do. That's why this government insists that educational change is no longer decided by public servants and politicians in Wellington with no input from those who are implementing the plans. That's you. Or any input from those who are affected by the final result, and that's our children, young people and their parents. That's why I wanted so many of you to be part of the ministerial reference and advisory groups that I've set up to shape the future of our education system. You may have noticed that I've been criticised for working with you in this way. In particular, those who never consulted you about anything seem to be concerned that I'm working with you on everything. I make no apologies for that, because proper and sustainable changes need time. They need to be worked through and they need to be agreed with those who are being asked to make them. Otherwise, they fail. And as you know, our children and our young people deserve better than that. So for nearly 2 years now, we've been working with you to redesign almost every aspect of our education system. We want to build a better system for all of our learners and for you as education professionals as well. I know that you're as important for progress as we are. You're more important for progress than we are. And I also know that there are some areas, but I also know that there are some areas where we don't need more collaboration and consultation before we can start to take action. I know that cost remains a barrier for far too many people achieving their full potential in education. That's why we're increasing funding for schools so they don't have to rely on parental donations and scrapping NZEI fees, among other things. We've also committed to replacing the decile funding system with a new system that will provide far better equity across schools. But it was the announcement of that decision last week that highlighted to me that we've still got a way to go when it comes to rebuilding trust and creating an environment in which true collaboration can really flourish. I listened to an interview with one school leader on the radio while I was driving to work last week, and I realised that there are still some parts of the education sector that are hardwired to react to any announcement by government with a degree of cynicism and even anger. The criticism of the move to an equity funding approach that I heard on the radio could only have come from someone who hadn't troubled themselves with the burden of establishing the details of what was proposed before bursting forth with their criticism. Criticism that's well-informed and constructive can play a really useful role in helping to build trust and improve decision-making. But criticism that's ill-informed and destructive reinforces an environment where true collaboration will never flourish. True collaboration doesn't just involve teachers and government working together either. It involves giving all stakeholders a voice, including young people and their families. True collaboration requires openness to 3 other C words: compromise, creativity, and change. True collaboration doesn't mean that the government would abrogate its responsibility to govern, but it means we work together with all of those who have relevant expertise and a relevant perspective to shape good, sound decisions. And finally, true collaboration, and here's the challenging part, means resisting the urge to immediately pick up a microphone every time we hear something we might disagree with, and instead pick up the phone. The introduction of dedicated learning support coordinators is another example that highlights we've still got a way to go when it comes to establishing a truly collaborative environment. We heard from you for a long time that the government needs to fund dedicated learning support roles in schools. So we allocated $217 million for the first tranche of learning support coordinators from the start of next year, with more to come in future years. This is a huge commitment on the part of the government. The Learning Support Coordinator role responds to the recommendations made by the 2016 Select Committee inquiry into the identification and support for children and young people with dyslexia, dyspraxia and autism spectrum disorders in primary and secondary schools. The new role is created specifically to help address learning support needs in schools and learning support clusters, and it'll be a permanent, fully funded role rather than one funded through the staffing entitlement. We agreed to make the extra funding available because we want it to be dedicated to the specific task of learning support coordination. It's intended to bring the full capacity of an experienced worker, an experienced teacher, to this really important work, without the pressure or distraction of other responsibilities. The role will work to identify and plan for the learning support needs of all children and young people within a school or kura, including those with moderate learning needs, and bring specialist help and support to classroom teachers. They'll have the responsibility for the school's learning support register to free up time from the SENCO where schools continue with that role. It was never going to be possible with 623 learning support coordinators in the first tranche to provide coverage for 2,500 schools at the ratio of 1 to 500 that we've committed to. So some schools were always going to miss out on the first allocation. But it's important to remember that it's just that, a first round of allocation, and we've made a commitment that all schools will have access to this support in the future. I've seen that some in the sector aren't happy with the learning support coordinator role as it's been defined, some going as far as to suggest that the role should be boycotted. The only people that will miss out if that happens are the young people who desperately need the extra support. I'm asking all of you to work with us to make the rollout of learning support coordinators a success. Getting the first tranche of coordinators, the first 623 coordinators in place, provides an opportunity to test the role in practice so that it can be further refined if it needs to be. There will be plenty of opportunity for you to contribute your ideas about how the role might be adjusted in the future and how the next tranche could be allocated. Because that's the thing about true collaboration. It isn't just a one-off thing, it's something that's ongoing. Because if we're going to rise to the challenges ahead, we're going to have to work together. And in a whole range of areas, we already are working together. For example, following our work to abolish national standards and return the focus back to the full curriculum and genuine learner progress, we've been taking a highly collaborative approach between a sector reference group, the Ministerial Advisory Group and the Ministry. Their work is a good example of what can be achieved when people work together to build on our existing strengths to design and implement change that improves the system for everybody. And I'm looking forward to seeing the next stages of that collaborative work. I've been a keen supporter of the new accord that we agreed as part of the recent collective negotiations. I see this as a really important way, a really important mechanism for us to reset the relationship and reset how we work together. Because sometimes our views will differ, but as partners we have to work together to resolve those differences.
I'm always prepared to listen, and I'm confident that our overall objectives for education are well aligned with the values and ideas of you and of your members. And I've spoken quite a bit about school teachers this morning, but I'd be remiss in addressing an NZEI conference if I didn't also mention two other vitally important workforces, our school support staff and our early childhood teachers. Negotiations on the support staff collective agreement, the last of the big collective agreements we'll negotiate in this term of government, are now well underway. But while they might be the last chronologically, I certainly don't see teacher aides and other support staff as being at the back of the queue. I know the vital role you all play in your schools, and I will be focusing on making sure that we do a good job for you as well. Work's underway as Lynda's mentioned, work's already underway to address pay equity for teacher aides. For the first time, we know more about the teacher aide workforce than we ever have before. More than 800 job descriptions have been assessed. Interviews have been held with over 50 teacher aides, their supervisors and their principals in a range of different school settings. 4 comparator roles have been identified that are male-dominated, and this means that we can make a thorough assessment on equitable pay for teacher aides. We're pushing ahead to get the teacher aide remuneration as equitable with those comparator roles in male-dominated workforces as quickly as we can. We're approaching these discussions with NZEI and with the School Trustees Association in a spirit of cooperation and partnership. And that is the way I'd like to see us continuing to work together in the future. In early childhood education, I know that the recent kindergarten settlement has exacerbated inequalities facing teachers working in other parts of the early childhood sector. During the last decade, there was no flow through from kindergarten settlements to the rest of the early childhood education system. The salary component of early childhood funding rates remained frozen for over a decade. That's a big legacy for us to confront, and it's going to take us some time to work our way through that. But I do want to assure you that teachers working in the wider ECE sector have not been forgotten, and we are committed to addressing the very real issues that you face. So finally, now that we've reached an agreement with you on pay for teachers and principals, we've got an exciting opportunity now to really embed a truly different way of working together, one that's based on a collaborative working relationship. So thank you for your goodwill. Thank you for your passion and for your commitment. Thank you for all that you are doing to ensure that every young New Zealander gets the educational opportunities that they deserve. Let's make the most of the opportunity that we have now to work together and to make a significant difference to the future of education in New Zealand. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
So the Minister has indicated that he will take some questions. So we've, in anticipation of that, we have some questions. Chloe Lundy Hodge from Wellington, an early childhood teacher. Are you there, Chloe? And can we get a microphone to, oh, come up here, Chloe. Chloe. There's a mic just here for you.
Kia ora, e te whānau ko Chloe Aho, Wellington branch. Kia ora, Minister. By early 2020, my early childhood kaiako colleagues and I will earn between 9 and 49% less than our colleagues working in kindergartens and schools. As a kaiako working in a community-based centre that is a member of the NZEI Collective, my colleagues and I have just voted overwhelmingly to endorse an immediate pay jolt of 11% and for a pay plan to fix the pay gap. However, our services cannot fix that gap without a significant increase in funding from the government. We know that you are committed to the principles of pay parity, pay equity, and the valuing of tamariki and their early learning. But there is an immediate crisis right now. Will the government commit to an immediate funding increase for ECE as the first step to fixing that huge pay gap?
In answer to the last part of your question, will we commit to a significant funding increase? You'll be aware that there's a government budget cycle that we're just starting to go through, and so the work on next year's budget is just in preparation now. And it's difficult for me as one minister out of 20 that sits around the cabinet table to give concrete assurances on anything during that process. But what I can give you a commitment on is that the number one thing at the top of my list of all of the budget bids that I will be putting forward in education to my cabinet colleagues is early childhood education. I think it is time. That might mean some not such good news for some of the rest of you, but it means it is time for us to put ECE at the top of the pile and make sure that that we're addressing those big and systemic issues. That underfunding, that decade of underfunding, we know has had a significant impact. So I guess I can give you that assurance that, in terms of my priorities going into the next budget round, you're right at the top of the list. It is going to take us a bit of time to work through, and we do have to look at how we fund ECE. Because a bit like support staff, the current kind of bulk funding model has some real pitfalls associated with it, and so we need to that's going to take a wee while to work through what alternatives to that system might look like, and we want to do that in a collaborative way.
And we have Ali Kemplin from Auckland, who is a teacher aide at Newton Central School. So Ali, where are you? And she's wearing black and white today because that's around fair pay.
Kia ora, I wasn't actually prepared for this, but I'll take the opportunity anyway. I've been a teacher aide for 21 years. A lot of us are in the job for a really long time because it's really important work. We don't just come and go. The only way we come and go is when we're on those silly fixed terms. The question that I would ask on behalf of members, we know that we're in the process, but we all want to know when our pay equity is happening. It's really hard to tell members it's happening, it's happening, it's happening. We'd really like it to be by Christmas. Could you answer that, please?
What I can give you, what I can give you a commitment on is that we want to work to resolve this as quickly as we can as well. Obviously, the settlement of a pay equity thing is a negotiation, and so there's always two sides to a negotiation. But I know that there is goodwill on both sides of this to move as quickly as we possibly can to get resolution as quickly as we can. There's the current collective negotiation round happening at the same time, which adds another layer of complexity to that. But I think that there really is a lot of goodwill in both of those spaces. So I think if we can build on that, get resolution with both of those as quickly as we can, I think that'll be really good. We're also mindful as a government that every pay equity claim that we have potentially speeds up the process for further pay equity claims as we go along as well, because we're getting better at doing this, and we've got a whole lot of them coming, and we want to be able to resolve them as quickly as we can. So those who are who got in earlier, they're the ones who are doing all of the work that actually is going to speed things up for everybody else as well, which is one of the reasons why we're taking our time to get it right with the early ones, so that it can actually help us then move some of the other ones along quicker too. So to all those of you who have been involved in this process, thank you, because the work that you are doing is not just going to benefit you, it's going to benefit all of those other workforces who also are pursuing pay equity issues.
Thank you, Chris. Good answer. I just want to say something else just around that one. My presidency finishes on the 31st of December, and this is the last little thing I've got on my list. Just saying. It would be such a lovely Christmas present. No pressure. So we now have Zara Jackson, who is a primary school teacher from Auckland.
Morning, everybody. My name is Zara Jackson. I am a teacher in South Auckland, Otahu. I've been there in the area for 11 years and I love what I do. 20 months ago, I gave birth to my first child, and within 17 months, I was being asked to come back full-time. It pulled at my heartstrings because, as I said, I love what I do, and it's really the hard workload and everything that's going on really made me think about, do I stay at home with my only child or do I go back to work because the kids need me? And I guess what I'd like to sort of ask is, how do you see the Accord making a tangible difference to teachers' wellbeing and workload?
There's a heck of a lot that I could address in that. One of the issues and one of the reasons that you are under pressure to come back to work so quickly is that we simply don't have enough teachers, and I want to acknowledge that, and I want to acknowledge the pressure that that places schools under. We saw over the last decade a 40% reduction in the number of people training to be teachers, and that cumulative effect of that over a decade is that that's thousands of teachers who didn't train and didn't enter the workforce, and we're having to make up for lost time as a result of that. Teacher trainee numbers did go up last year. We got an extra 400 people into teacher training last year over and above what we would have had in 2017. The good news is that's stabilised at that higher level this year. It hasn't gone up any further this year, but it seems to have stabilised around that number. I think when you consider what we were engaged in the first half of the year, that's probably not a bad outcome in the circumstances, but I think now that we have a period of hopefully tranquility, we've got an opportunity to really push teaching as a profession and get more people into it, and I think that that'll make a difference. Dealing with issues around workload and a lot of the things that are on the table for discussion in the Accord process actually rely on us getting more people into teaching. So I'm getting weekly updates on teacher supply, on teacher training, on what we're doing to make sure we're filling the vacancies that we've got, because I know that this is a really important issue. But just to be clear again, you know, the pathway to becoming a teacher takes 3 to 4 years. And so even if we, you know, even with the work we've been doing to turn that around since we became the government, we're not going to see the results of that for another year or two at the earliest, because it takes some time to get people through teacher training. But we're working as hard as we can on that. With that wider issue around the Accord, I'm really hopeful that some of those big issues around workload, around stress and well-being can be addressed through the Accord process. Bearing in mind, of course, that some of those issues are not things that I have that much ability to directly influence, which is why the Accord process is really important. Because issues like workload, school leadership has a real role to play in reducing workload and in dealing with issues of well-being. And in order to do that, we have to focus on the well-being and the workload of those school leaders as well. And so that's where I think the Accord process gives us an opportunity to get all of that stuff on the table and work our way through it. You know, what are the things we can do collectively that can make a difference, so that we're really putting well-being at the heart of it.
Thank you.
And we've probably got time for one more quick question, because I am aware of the time, and that's Paul Johnson from Taranaki. He's a principal in Taranaki. So Paul, oh good, you were halfway here. Read my mind.
Kia ora Minister, kia ora whānau. Paul Johnson, Principal of Te Kura Wainga o Ngā Motu, New Plymouth Central School. I think Ali has kind of jumped in here, but I just want to expand on that a little bit. I'm one of those people that has to employ teacher aides on those silly fixed terms, and none of us like to do it, and we have to do it at a pay rate so that we can manage our budgets and be accountable to the auditors and to everybody else. And as a result, we pay people unfairly, because that's simply how we're funded. Upwards of 90% of teacher aides in this country are paid below the living wage. My wife's a teacher aide. I know all about it. And pretty much what I'm after is, what will you do to provide us, principals, schools, boards of trustees in the sector, with some kind of funding or staffing mechanism for teacher aides that isn't dependent, it doesn't make us have to do this silly fixed term nonsense.
And looking at the issues around support staff generally, so teacher aides and all of the other support staff, I want to acknowledge that the funding system really does create some real unfairness and some real inequities in the system, and we know that that's something we've got to address. We've got a whole host of issues in this space that we've got to work our way through, some of which we can resolve more quickly than others. So we've got, like I mentioned before, we've got the collective agreement negotiations happening at the moment. The cost of those collective agreements has typically been out of school operations grants. We've got the pay equity agreement that we're negotiating, and the government has made a commitment to meet the cost of any pay equity settlement that arises from that. But there's an interaction, of course, between the two that we have to then consider, which is, how do we get the funding system right, so that we're not just putting more money in for a temporary quick fix that then over time leads to the same situation developing again as the school's real terms funding continues to erode away again. And I've always been of the view that a different funding formula for school support staff, one, it can be similar to teachers, but it's got to be different because the nature of the workforce is different, the way schools use support staff is different, and we have to build a system that allows for all of that. But I think there can be quite a different funding system for school support staff, and I think that once we get the pay equity settlement reached, we've then got that opportunity to look at some of those bigger issues. Pay equity, of course, the pay rates are not the only issue. There's also the fixed term nature of the agreements. There's the fact that many school support staff don't get paid during school holidays. All of those things have got to be addressed too, and so we have to sort of sequence our work there so that we're stepping through it in a logical way. But please be assured that all of that is on the agenda in front of us.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you for talking about the learning support coordinators. I think the message that we've got from that is the moving forward will be around working together about making this successful, so that we do end up with a learning support coordinator for every school in this country. You're supposed to clap. Goodness me. And also, it's really clear through the answers to the questions that you understand the depth of what there is in front of us all, and that you understand that we have a lot more to do. I'd like to reiterate what I said earlier, and I think you've captured it in your speech too, that it's vitally important as we move forward that we remember those shared values and shared goals, and that we try our hardest to work together collaboratively to fix the big issues that still face us. I acknowledge that as government you have had a number of competing priorities, and you will continue to do so, especially coming in as you did after a decade of severe underfunding in our sector. In my mind, our relationship is a bit like whānau. We may argue, there may be a bit of raru-raru, there may even be moments when we can't stand each other. But as with whānau, there's a deeper sense of connection and purpose that underpins our relationship. We have so much more in common that joins us than we do that separates us. Indeed, I'm reminded of a speech that a former NZEI Te Riu Roa executive member and well-respected friend of mine and colleague, Jan Tanetti, who's right here in front of me, and who is now a parliamentary colleague of yours, gave in reply to then Minister Hekia Parata in 2015. Certainly a minister we had far less in common with than we do with you. But what Jan said rings true now, and many of you will have been in the room. She got a standing ovation for this. She talked about how navigating and improving her relationship with her teenage son made her realise how we must approach the relationship between union and government. For her, it was about realising it needed to be a relationship of equals, underpinned by mutual respect. That's certainly my hope as we all tackle the next pressing issues. And indeed, we've already seen great progress made in our collaborative approach with the Ministry around the teacher aid pay equity process. Can you please join with me in thanking the Minister for taking the time to join us? And then I'm going to walk him out so that he gets to his plane. And I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to talk to the person next to you and your table around what you've taken out of our session so far this morning. Thank you so much, Chris, for being with us.